This week, an exclusive interview with Brother John Crivellone, award-winning author, truth-teller, and a working man philosopher. All this and more. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry. Here's your host, Brother Robert Johnson.
Welcome back to the show. This is episode number 694. Since July of 2011, the Whence Came You podcast has been creating weekly Masonic education for anyone interested in Freemasonry and, of course, its kindred sciences. This is no small endeavor, requiring hours of work each week on top of what we all have: work, kids, spouses, lodge. If you are out there and you're thinking, hey, how can I help support this podcast and Masonic education, head on over to our website and click on Support the Show. There, you can see the various options of how you can help support us through giving, either through Patreon or through PayPal. My thanks goes out to our contributors, fellows, producers, and of course, our legacy partners who make it possible to make those large changes to our show that otherwise would take years to fund. We also have options for one-time gifts as well. So, to anyone out there who is thinking, thank you for any considerations. And of course, to those current, past, and future contributors, fellows, producers, and legacy partners, thank you so very much. As far as presentations coming up, November 15th, I'll be in Colorado Springs, while I know many of you will be heading on down to Kentucky to go to the SRICF meeting. I will not be able to attend there this year. I'm looking forward to potentially, I've already blocked the weekend off for next year, so I'm hoping I can make that happen. And then in December, I'll be heading out to the Valley of Columbus, ancient accepted Scottish Rite, Northern Masonic jurisdiction, to do the Tetragrammaton, a lecture that explores the entire concept of the lost word. We'll have a lot of fun there. And then Masonic Week happens in February, and there's all kinds of really great stuff going on, and my calendar is starting to fill up. I bought a new planner the other day, and I had to put all my dates in there, and I was like, holy cow. So anyway, it's always a lot of fun to be able to go out there and share in fellowship and visit other lodges. So if you're curious on getting either myself or anyone out, for that matter, for education to your lodge, you can head on over to MasonicInstruction.com and you can browse an entire huge list of Masonic speakers all over the world who are willing to either zoom in or visit your lodge, lists of their topics. It's like a speakers bureau, but global. And that's made possible by, of course, the things that I work on to make that website possible, but it is generously hosted by Powers Media, which is Brother Alex Powers under the Grand Lodge of Kansas and A Powers Media. So our thanks goes out to him, but you'll be able to find Masonic education for your next meeting right there if you need an outside speaker. This week, I've got a great interview with Brother John Crivellone, who is the author of 2 books and is working on a 3rd. He's truly an insightful brother who has worked in the real world pursuing truth, that 3rd most important tenet of Freemasonry. Let's check out this interview right now. All right, everybody. Thank you once more for joining us on the WCY podcast. This week, we are super excited, super lucky to have Brother John Crivellone here on the show. He is a published author. He's got a couple books out there. They are fantastic. Got another one that's upcoming that I read the synopsis of. I'm super stoked to read that one. But John, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
I first met John. We were out at a lodge meeting. I was doing a presentation. I heard him talk about his books to somebody, asked him about it, and he started telling me about it. It sounded fascinating. I said, we got to get you on the show. And so here you are. Brother John, before we get started, can you give us just a little background on when you came into Masonry, your lodge name, number, all that good stuff?
There was a Masonic lodge right by my house that I actually meet at now. And it didn't seem like I had any interest at the time until my son, I had 3 sons. My oldest son got a little bit older. He was a big history buff, and he studied history and the founding fathers, and he became fascinated with Freemasonry because the country that we live in was founded on Freemason principles, and that's why it is a great country. People really need to understand that. So he actually joined Freemasonry before I did. And so I'm trying to be a good father. I joined Freemasonry with him. And so that was 16 years ago. So being a Freemason for only 16 years is, as you know, is like a blink of an eye in Freemasonry. At least
it is.
It really is, because you talk to these guys, and we just lost a guy, was an elder in our lodge. He had been a demolay. And so this gentleman joined Jimmy Callis. I don't know if you remember Jimmy Callis. And so he joined at age 18 and was a Freemason his entire life until he passed away last year. He was 77 years old. And so guys like that, they have 60 plus years in Masonry, and I have 16 years in Masonry. It just seems like a blink of an eye. And so my son and I joined it. I studied a lot about it before I joined it. I realized it was something I wanted to be a part of. All of our forefathers had joined it, and they used the principles of Freemasonry in order to form this great nation of ours. That was something I wanted to belong to.
I love the story. I think that it's so common. It's a common story, but it's a great story that in this day and age, we have so many people who, they're born, they live their lives, and perhaps other than a few weird political upsets because of something that's happened on the news or whatever they become aware of, have no real mind for the history of the country,
exactly.
the civic engagement that we are built on, and of course the Masonic influence on those things. And I just think it's such a great story to tell. When people say, I joined because our founding members of our nation, the ideals that we uphold, these are very progressive ideas. And, there's even things within the Constitution of the United States that they just sound as though the guy who wrote the ritual wrote the Constitution.
Well, in fact, if you historically, and I haven't really studied this in length yet, but according to what I understand, that when the forefathers wanted to draw up a constitution, nobody had one. The only people that had a constitution were the Freemasons, and and you brought it up just now, a lot of what was in the Freemason Constitution, they used the Freemason Constitution as an outline for the United States Constitution. And I always say to people, and they ask me, what is Freemasonry all about? I say, well, read the United States Constitution, look at the United States Capitol, read what our forefathers had to say, because a lot of what they said, not that it was word for word, but it was kind of copied from Freemason texts, Thomas Jefferson and George Washington, and they were all Freemasons, and carried that type of truth and justice over to their regular lives and their political lives.
Which is super fascinating considering how separate Masonry is from politics today, but that's another episode.
It's not taught in schools. When I was in school, grammar school, high school, they never talked about that the forefathers were Freemasons. Ever. Never knew it. I mean, shouldn't that be part of our history? It's just a fact of what they were all about. They talk about everything else they were all about. I mean, that the forefathers met in secret and formed the Constitution, and they talked about forming a new country. And the Freemason part of it is, you had guys that they lost their fortunes. They sacrificed everything. They were all Freemasons, and they sacrificed it all for this nation to form it. So it's a lot to be said about that. But people nowadays want to make that sacrifice.
Well, let me ask you, we all have day jobs, right? Masons, for the most part, we all have day jobs. And as I was going through some of your resume, and the things that you've done in your time, you've always been an investigator. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about that background.
Well, for the last 25 years, I've been an investigator. I was an investigator privately, and I ran an investigation company. I ran an investigation / security firm. We did all security, electronic. We did private investigations. We did security officers, hired a lot of off-duty policemen. It was kind of an interesting place because we were a small company. So if we had to do a specialized modality, for example, if we had some contracts with insurance companies, and if we had to do a arson investigation, well, investigations are a specialty thing, just like a lot of things are. You have doctors that specialize in cancer, they specialize in childbirth, they specialize in all kinds of different things. And the same thing goes with investigations. Some guys, you can't be an investigator that's good at all investigations. I don't do homicide investigations, never did them. I've assisted in them, but I wouldn't tackle one. I don't I don't like it, and I don't think I would be good at it. So what we would do in the private industry was we would contact the Chicago Police, the Cook County Sheriff, or some of the other police departments, the Illinois State Police, and we would talk to a guy that's what his specialty was. In the Chicago Police, they spend about $1 million training a guy in that modality, and so we would hire him on his days off or whatever to come and work for us and to do the investigations.
Nice.
So yeah, and I would assist on the investigations and coordinate it with the insurance companies and whatnot. And so I learned a lot with all of that. And then what happened was that before I was in private industry, I had been with the Cook County Sheriff's Department for a brief period of time. And so when it was time to leave the company, the owner died. There was a lot of upheaval, and then I had decided to go back to government. And so I took several tests with the sheriff, with the state's attorney, with the public defender's office, and I ended up at the public defender's office. I didn't think I was going to like it because I was mostly used to chasing bad guys rather than defending them. But all investigations are predicated on what I learned in Freemasonry, which is the truth. And so getting to the point of the truth of the matter is what really is what's the most important thing in the investigation. And what I learned is that even in public defender investigations, everybody has a right for a defense in this country. And I don't think a week goes by where I don't have somebody calling me saying, gee, my son just got caught with doing this, or my daughter got caught. Somebody, can you help me out with this, with their defense? And so, and then I'll turn them on to the proper lawyers or whatever. And so being with the public defender investigation unit, I'm in felony. I've always been in felony at 26th in California. It's been a very fulfilling career for me. I've really enjoyed the people that I work with, the camaraderie. I'm getting ready. I don't know if I told you this. I'm getting ready to retire in June.
Oh my gosh! Congrats.
And I'm having the thing that we mostly want in life, and you look at, I'm going to retire. Now that I'm getting close to it, I'm becoming saddened by it.
Oh gosh.
It's like I'm going to be handing that badge, and it's going to be an emotional day. So what are you going to do?
It sounds really amazing, it's very special, I think, when we can do something that we feel touches or fulfills the mission of whatever that calling in life is, and especially I think for a lot of Masons, we try to find that thing in our day job that fulfills some portion. What's the feel good of what we do? And I think, you described that wonderfully, thinking about how, everybody has the right to a defense, and the public defender's office, that is a calling that I think is so, I guess, would say like underrated in terms of what you do for people.
Sure. And people don't understand that because we've got some excellent people at our place. We have 500 attorneys. We've got, I think, 60 investigators. We've got a whole great staff of people. And we, as the public defender, that's what we are. We defend people with no money. I mean, you look. I mean, I always look at different people. You see these celebrities. They like the OJ. He had F. Lee Bailey.
Yeah. Well, it's just like, what else could call to that same? I mean, there's a ton of things out there, I suppose, but to really understand the fact that, the public defender is somebody who doesn't have the means to pay.
Right.
So how altruistic are you going to get?
Exactly.
It is in fact a very altruistic thing to do.
And that's part of our Constitution, too. And that's part of what Freemasonry does, instilled into that Constitution. I remember I'm an installing officer, and one of the things that I like to install is the senior warden, because the nomenclature that I have to announce with the senior warden is that everybody is entitled to, even though you're on the lowest spoke of fortune's wheel, everybody is entitled to our regard, and so that's part of the phrase analogy in it. There's something to be said with that.
I want to talk about your first book, Ink on Your Hands. It's about community, some betrayal, a local paper getting crushed.
It's based on a true story. In my formative years, when I graduated from high school, I did not have the grade point average or the means to go to university.
Sure.
So I went to junior college. And as I went to junior college, I worked. And I worked construction for a while and everything. And then my father had started a small community newspaper, and I worked for him. And then we took on some partners and whatnot, and we became a very large community newspaper, believe it or not. 166,000 circulation at one point.
Holy cow.
Yeah. And, I look at some of the stuff now, you got these people, they're on TV and everything. And I'll look at them, and they're a publisher, and then I look at what they publish. It's 8,000 pieces, and I'm like, and I worked, it was 166,000. It was mainly a neighborhood shopper style, and so we didn't have any controversial news, but we had a lot of good things that we did for the neighborhood. Boy Scouts, public relations articles for the Boy Scouts, and it's all mentioned in my book, where you had all of these people that came and they wanted to write a little article about, you had a guy that was good at gardening, we let him write a gardening article. You had a guy that was good at golf, so we let him write a golf column. We had a lawyer that wrote a law column. Everybody had a little their hand in it a little bit,
And it's really interesting to hear you talk about this, because it's like, yeah, you worked for that. And it's obvious that your civic and public mindset has been with you since the beginning.
Since the beginning. I've done so much volunteer work. I'm a Shriner as well. And these guys are trying to get me to join the Scottish Rite. I'm spread too thin now. I'm writing books. I'm a Mason. I'm a Shriner. And, if you want to be a good Mason, if you want to do it right, you'll volunteer for things. We've got guys. I had a guy, and you want to get guys involved, and you got guys, they join the club, and you see them sitting in the corner, and you try to get them involved in things. And I had a guy, and I went up to him, and I said, okay, would you like to do this? You want to sit in a chair? You want to help us with our Christmas party? And he looked at me, and he said, well, you have to understand, I'm a knife and fork Mason. And I said, what's that? And he said, well, I go to dinner and lunch, and I like to meet people. And he was a nice guy and everything. He liked to meet people. He liked to do this, but he didn't like to do any. But you know what? After a while, and I think he was probably just kind of shy and everything, unsure. And after a while, we actually did get him doing things. You know what I mean? He doesn't do a lot. He doesn't take a chair. He doesn't He doesn't involve himself in a lot of things, but we got him involved. He does volunteer for things now, and helps with the kids when we do stuff with the kids and things like that, and Christmas parties, and everybody gets involved. Everybody does something. So,
John, it takes the right kind of person, the right kind of lodge to get somebody engaged. So that's awesome that you guys got him.
Yeah.
How did you come about writing that first book? What was did you just say, because it's based on true life experience.
Correct. Well, here's how I wrote it. As you read the book, you'll see that it's a nice company, very community minded company, kind of a smaller entity. Nobody made a real lot of money there. Everybody worked. People liked their jobs. There was a lot of people working there. It was local. People didn't have to drive downtown or anywhere, and it was a comfortable atmosphere. And so through a series of acquisitions, we get taken over by a large company out of St. Louis, Pulitzer. And so they come in like gangbusters, and they start ripping the place to pieces and firing everybody and laying people off and doing this and that. And so at the end, we're all forced out. We all have to go. The writing's on the wall. What they did was they had paid too much money for everything because they just wanted to get control of it. What their plan was to buy up all these newspapers to ring the city of Chicago, and they were going to take on the Chicago Tribune, and nobody could take on the Chicago Tribune. Chicago Tribune back then was the big boy on the block, and nobody was going to mess with them. And these guys, tried to, and the Tribune put them right in their place right away. And so what they did was, and we were not aware of it, was they sent all their accountants up and said, "Hey, just get us our money back." And so, and so what they did was they just fired everybody that was making money and hired real cheap people, and then they took this apart and that apart, and then they sold this off and that off, and they weren't interested in building anything, and we didn't realize that. We knew they weren't interested in building anything at that point, but we didn't understand why, and that was what eventually happened. So I ended up losing my job and didn't really have anything, and that's how I got into investigation work, because I was really kind of actually pretty young at the time. I was 32 years old. I didn't really have anywhere else to go, and so I went with this private investigation firm that I knew. Went with then I went with the Cook County Sheriff's Department at the same time. Did both jobs, worked hard, and I was able to recreate myself. But there was a lot of guys that were a little older. They weren't able to do that, and it was very hard. And you could see it was hard on a lot of people. And so after a couple of years, after several years, I wrote the book as a form of therapy, because I just couldn't forget it. I couldn't realize the lies, the deception, the backstab, everything happened, because when you people don't realize it, but when you're going to lose your job and you don't have anywhere to go, or you're unsure, losing a job is very traumatic. Oh yeah. I mean, that's the way you feed your family. That's the way you pay your kids' tuition, your mortgage, and you got to start all over again. Or what are you going to do? And so a lot of guys do some very underhanded thing and backstabby things to keep their job, and I saw that. And it happened to me through guys, and they were willing to do whatever they had to do to keep their job. Nobody kept it. Nobody kept their job. Everybody went. Yeah. Everything happened. So what I did was, I had read somewhere, and I can't remember where I read it, but I read that if you go through this big emotional turmoil and everything like that, I really couldn't get it out of my head. So what I did was, and I wasn't involved in Freemasonry yet, so that would have helped, I think, the camaraderie and everything. And it really would have, because Freemasons help each other. If I would have been a Freemason at that time and lost my job, I would have got another one right away. Like, you know what I mean? Somebody would help me. So anyway, I wrote the book, and I even had it edited a little bit and everything, and I had it on a shelf in my closet. And it stayed on that shelf for about 8 or 9 years.
Oh my gosh.
So I started moving. I still had some kids living at home. One kid living at home. And so I was cleaning the rooms and everything. And I had a friend of mine over, and I had the manuscript in my hand. I was going to throw it away. And he said to me, "No, you need to publish that." He said, "That's about a hostile corporate takeover." He goes, "Everybody's been through something like that." He goes, you have no idea. Probably 30-40% of the population has been through something similar. And I'll tell you, a real funny part now is probably one of the main things that you have to do in authoring a book is finding the right publisher. It's very difficult to self-publish. So I knew I couldn't really do it. I didn't know how. So a friend of mine that is always billed as Chicago's last Republican, he was the head of the Cook County Republican Party, a guy named Sean Morrison. And he's a good friend of mine. We were friends for many, many years. And so before he got into politics. So I was looking at his Facebook page, and there was a girl on his Facebook page that was a publisher. So I thought to myself, gee, he's a big politician. He wouldn't have anybody on his site that isn't reputable, or he can't take a chance. And so I called this woman, and very nice girl, probably the smartest person I ever met in my life. And we got along real well, and I hired her to publish my book, and she did a fabulous job, and we're still working together.
That's awesome.
So I ran into him one day, and I said, "Sean, I hired that friend of yours," and her name is Stephanie Kroll, Dr. Stephanie Kroll, and I said, "I hired that friend of yours, Stephanie Kroll, and she did a beautiful job of publishing my book." And he looked at me and he says, "Stephanie who?" And he said, I don't know who that is. I don't know who that is. He says she's on my Facebook, but I don't know her. No, I thought he had checked her out and everything, but it turned out perfect, and somebody up there must like me. So that's how that all came about.
Yeah, I mean, I find it fascinating. I mean, I went through a corporate buyout myself back when I worked when I was in aviation, and
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a super stressful time. And I think it's
really
an incredible stressful situation on everybody. And your point about having this catharsis, this therapy to get it all out, it really does work. And, I think sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction, right?
It really is. I mean, and I just wrote it for therapy. I wanted to publish it, but I didn't want to. And then he talked me into it, and it worked out perfect. It's a good selling book, and people like it. It's funny.
So you've got another book that you put out. It's, I guess you would call it a surveillance book, being watched, this kind of thing. Can you tell us a little bit about that second book?
Yeah, I did then. After a while, when I changed careers, I went with the Sheriff's Department. Of course, I was in private security, private investigations, and now working with investigations with the Public Defender's Office. So Big Brother's watching. When you are in investigations, and that becomes what you do for a living, you start paying attention to your surroundings. It's, when you look around you, people are busy with their lives. They're thinking about sending their kids to college, their mortgages, this and that. And you really aren't paying attention to the cameras that are on you, what's happening and what's tracking you. And so as I went about with what I do for a living and everything, and always studying evidence, you have DNA, and I'm always going across this evidence and video evidence and fingerprint evidence and this and that. And I'm thinking to myself, gee, look at everything that we have, and it's evolving, and it's been evolving in the last 15 years or 16 years that I've been involved with the Public Defender's Office and governmental investigations. It's really evolved. And so one day I thought to myself, I'm going to pay attention to my own self. And I drove to work, and I was captured by 6 cameras on my way to work, speeding cameras and red light cameras. And I did some research, and it's only 12 miles to go to work for me. It takes me an hour to get there, but I did some research into the cameras, and those cameras are on all the time. I thought they turned on when there was an infraction. If you sped through the light, it caught you, and then it turned on and it took your picture. That's not the case. It's always on. The camera's on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So every day that I get up and I drive to work, I'm on camera. And so then when I get out of my car at work, I'm on camera again, walk into my office. I'm in the lobby at work, I'm on camera again. Some of these cameras has facial recognition. Then I get up to my office, I log into my computer with my private code. I'm being tracked on it, that cell phone. And that's another thing, your cell phone, these things are beautiful. They're one of the greatest inventions of mankind, but it's also the biggest thing that's tracking us all the time. And so I did a lot of research on cell phones. One of the most shocking things about cell phones is in your cell phone, there's a gyroscope. That gyroscope can tell a tracker where you are. I'm not talking about geographic locations. I'm talking about the geographic location. Plus, if you're on the second story of the building, the first story, or the basement of the building. If you're riding your bike down the street, if you're lying on your couch, it can tell a tracker, because if you have it in your hand, the gyroscope will let them know that you're horizontal. So there's just so many things that are tracking us. And I decided I wanted to write a book about it because I wanted to get that out there.
So when you put this book together,
yes,
how long was it between the first book and this book?
Probably about 2 years, about a year and a half.
And so given that time period, you obviously saw some success with the first book. Mm-hmm. Was the second book faster to come together, or was because it was a different topic, you found yourself it took longer to put together, or how was that process?
It was probably put together faster because I knew what I was doing then. When I wrote my first book, it was a disaster. If it wasn't for the publisher, it probably would have ended up in the garbage because I was making so many mistakes, and I finally was able to get the book put together with her. The book turned out very good because it was edited properly, not by me, by a professional editor. I mean, I knew how to write and things like that, but you want it to be done well. And so with the publisher, we had some editors come and look at the book, edit it. I had artists draw it up. And that's why another reason why you saw those beautiful cover that I have on my second book, because the artist knows what she's doing. And that's all she does is book art. So we hired her to do my book for Big Brother's Watching. it was hard and it was easy. It was easier to put the book together, but harder because it was overlapping with the other book.
Interesting.
Ink on Your Hands, I had come out with the book. I had a book signing. I had a rollout party. And then I was on a couple radio shows, and then I did book signings and at bookstores. And then at the same time, I'm working for the Public Defender's Office. I'm writing the new book, and so you want to do a lot with masonry too, and so I've been pretty busy. I've been keeping myself busy, but luckily the book turned out real well. I was on a radio station with Art Andros, 8:20 a.m. one day, talking about the book right after it came out, and a producer from L.A. called me and wants to know if I want to make a movie out of the book. So that's what I've got going right now. And so I signed an agreement with her to shop it. And so it's being shopped in LA right now to see if they're going to do it like a documentary or a movie or something out of it. So
that would be incredible.
It would be, yeah.
Let me ask a philosophical question for you here.
Sure.
We look at masonry and this idea of privacy and, of course, truth and all of this. In your opinion, man and mason, where do you draw the line between healthy privacy and hiding the truth? Is there a line?
Well, yeah, I think there is a line because you have the right to privacy, and that's what this book is all about. Truth. Somebody asks you the truth about what you're doing at your work or what you're doing at Freemasonry or whatever. I mean, Freemasonry has its rules and regulations about privacy too. They want privacy within the confines of Freemasonry, and people also have the right to have privacy in oneself. You don't have any obligation to tell anybody anything about yourself, about what you make for a living, how much money you make, what's going on in your personal life, you and your wife. Those are voluntary things. What's happening with us now is because of cell phones, because of logging in on your computer, because of spy planes, because of drones, because of all of these things that we are subject to, we're losing it. We're losing that privacy. And so that's where the truth lies. You know what I'm saying? If you can understand that.
Well, I think that's really, so I'll pull that thread a little bit into this idea. Several years ago, I got into data architecture and things, and that's what I do for work. I'm a data scientist. And so several years ago, I was talking with somebody, and we were talking about the U.S. economy. We go from an industrialized society to a service economy. And in a service economy, you find that the most valuable thing in the world, right? So you got the two ideas, right? Pennies make dollars.
Yes.
And you can sell data for pennies.
Yes.
And the more people you get data on, the more pennies you get. And so in this whole idea, right, like we become this society who almost says like data is the new oil, right?
You're right on target. Man, that's very full. Yeah, you're right on target. You're very philosophical about this. Yes.
And so I guess one of my questions is, like, I'll give you an example. As part of a research project I did some continuing education a few years ago, and we were looking at studies that had been done. Some people knew, some people didn't know they were being studied, this kind of thing. But one of the things is, let's say you're on Amazon.com. I can, like as a data scientist, I can look at how long you hovered your mouse over a product before you clicked buy or add to cart. Or I can see how long you stayed on an item before you kept scrolling. And that tells me what and how I can market to you. I have a good friend of mine who's in sales, and he's a marketing manager, spent many years as a marketing manager. And as in sales, he was always kind of off put by like this idea that like sales can feel slimy. And I asked him, I said, well, how do you make yourself feel better about the idea of feeling slimy in sales? And he said, well, I have to reframe it to look at it really what I feel like it is. And that is, I want to help people connect to products that they want. And I say, okay, cool. So how do you do that? And then we get into this conversation, this larger conversation about these sort of things that kind of seem skeezy, right? Like knowing that you spent 20 seconds highlighting over the big bag of Cheetos before you hit add to cart tells me that you probably like Cheetos and I should probably show more Cheetos in your timeline, right? Like whatever it is. So knowing that, I guess they are by our own assent. Like we all agree to the TOS agreement, the terms of service, when we sign up for an application or something, and nobody really reads the terms of service agreements. We all just click OK so we can use the product, because if we don't click it, we can't use the product.
Yeah.
And maybe AI changes that a little bit. Like if I fed the TOS agreement into AI and said, tell me the bullets of what I should know. What rights am I gaining? What rights am I losing in terms of my privacy? That's going to be interesting to see what happens there. But I'm curious, from your point of view, what might be some simple privacy steps that you've realized that maybe people or lodges and members can take right now, that if they've got concerns about privacy stuff? Like, what have you seen?
That's a real good question, because it's getting to be less and less you can do. Unless you want to move off the grid somewhere. I mean, for example, the biggest factor, and we just talked about it, is the cell phone. Now, they have what they call a Faraday bag, that it's lined with certain metals, I think copper and nickel and some other metals, and you could put your cell phone into this Faraday bag and they can't track you then. No signals can get in the bag. If you wanted to get a Faraday bag and shield your cell phone, now here's the problem. The cell phone is, what it's there for is you can get phone calls. But when you have it in a Faraday bag, you can't get any calls.
Right.
So then when you take the phone out of the Faraday bag, the phone has to update. So you shielded the phone from Wi-Fi and everything else that updates it, and it has to update, it has to go forward. Even where you drive, people drive on the toll road. The toll road has cameras. You don't go on the toll road any longer and go through the toll booth. The cameras take a picture of every single license plate going down the road. So they know. So could you take different roads? And you can. Instead of taking 294, you could take Route 83. It's going to be longer. But even Route 83 has cameras on it, at different points,
Well, my wife for a long time, 12 years, worked for an agency. And when I would visit her at work, there's these screens everywhere. Every desk has 5 or 6 screens.
Sure.
And around the room are screens of basically every intersection live. And I'm just like, holy cow, is this when there's an incident? Nope. 24/7.
They're on all the time. And It's getting worse and worse as we go forward. There's not a lot we can do. I think that in the future, and they're doing this in Europe, they're starting to adopt legislation now. In Europe, the Europeans are a little bit ahead of us in this realm. But I think in the future, there has to be, like, the American Civil Liberties Union is starting to be active with more privacy rules. And I think what needs to happen is that we have to lobby our representatives to do things to give us and preserve this privacy. Shut those cameras off unless there's an infraction. There's no reason for those cameras to be on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. What their intent is to catch a bad guy going through a red light. Then it needs to just go on when that red light goes on, when you violate the red light. And so I think adopting legislation to protect people, to do things that you can do to protect yourself, like the Faraday bag, things like, there are companies that are, it's like a cottage industry now, to where they have different clothing that you can wear that throw off cameras. And so
I've heard about this.
Yeah. And so do you want to change your whole attire? I mean, do they, does this clothing company have clothes that I like to wear? I mean, is it a lot? So you would have to really work hard at it. And I don't know if you could still overcome everything. There's a lot of conveniences that we take for granted. You want to use a credit card. Even your water usage, if there was a nefarious investigator and he wanted to spy on you, he could go to where all your water usage is digitalized, unless you live in the country. I have a son that lives up in Wisconsin. His water is still well. He's got a well water. But my water here is digitalized. And so nefarious investigator was looking at it digitally on a computer. He could see, I just used 1.6 gallons of water. Well, I just went to the toilet. I just used 7.5 gallons of water. I just took my shower. I just used a quart of water. I just made my coffee. They could make an assumption on what your hypothesis on what you're doing when you're doing it. If all of a sudden you're using a real lot of water, Why is he using so much water? Maybe he's got a growing station in his basement. I mean, just with water. Electricity is the same thing. Your appliances give off algorithms that they're able to look at. When your refrigerator goes on, well, his refrigerator's going on a lot. He must be in his refrigerator doing something. And so there's a lot of ways to spy on a guy. And so unless you're washing your clothes by hand and you're not using any electricity, and it would just be very difficult.
It is an interesting thing that you mentioned, because as I was scrolling your website, actually, you had a paraphrase that I thought, I was like, where did I hear that before? And I want to say blog on your website, and I find it was really fun to read. The latest piece I saw in here was called The Price of Truth, Whistleblowers, Satirists, and the Last Line of Defense. And you said, freedom doesn't disappear in a blinding flash of tyranny. It dies quietly, strangled by silence.
That's right.
And in today's world, the loudest voice for truth aren't coming from elected officials or so-called watchdog institutions. They're coming from comedians, whistleblowers, and social critics who dare to call out the farce that we're living in. And I found that really interesting, because your point that you started with, freedom doesn't disappear in a blinding flash of tyranny. It dies quietly, strangled by silence. There's a similar quote by one of the founding fathers that talks about, under the guise of security, what are you willing to give up?
That's Ben Franklin. I have that in my book. Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety.
And so it is so interesting, because we do live in a world in which is dominated by convenience.
Exactly.
And we think those conveniences, what am I giving up to get this convenience? Well, I'm getting a cheaper price, or I'm getting this. But at the same time, the company that's offering you the convenience that you're buying from is not only winning your business, but your data.
Exactly. And they're selling it to third parties.
Yes, which I think is another one. It's like, hey, why can the gas station give you 10 cents off per gallon?
Sure.
Because they made it back.
That database. I see that database. Free gas. Who doesn't want free gas?
Yeah, exactly. So this brings me to the third book that you're working on. I realize that it's not out yet. You have the title, The American Bubble. And I immediately was like, this is the one I got to read this book, right?
I haven't done yet.
So it's The American Bubble. It says, pulls back the curtain on the grand illusion of American democracy, power games, political theater, and the truth they never wanted you to know. And I think that is going to be a really good book. It's going to sell well based on just that alone, because in the last, probably 15 years, we've seen intense discord in the American political theater, even going back as far as you want to say, maybe even 9/11 with the Patriot Act and all of that.
Right.
And I guess I'm curious, with this book, the new book digs into, what you might call the show of modern politics. And tell us a little bit about that idea. And then I have a follow-up question I'd like to ask you about it as it relates to Masonry.
What the book will be entailing is that I take democracy from what our founding fathers envisioned. They had a vision, this Jeffersonian democracy. Their vision was that we would be a democracy similar to the ancient Greeks, where we would all get together and we would elect officials amongst our own group to represent us. We would be a representative republic that would represent us in Washington. They would represent us in our state legislatures and whatnot, and look out for our best interest, the best interest of their constituents and the people in their neighborhoods and whatnot. So fast forward to now, what we have is guys getting elected, and what they're doing is they're doing the best, not for us, but for party. And that right there is going to be the crux of it, because what this country is becoming more and more divided. People are becoming more and more delusional. We're not believing in the country as it stands right now. We have to get back to the fundamentals. And you always hear coaches talk about the fundamentals with the different sports. And the same analogy can hold true for our political system. The system that it's based on is not there any longer, and it needs to come back.
Yeah, I feel like the idea of sort of a back to basics civics would be something that is just amazing. I mean, we don't teach civics in school anymore. I think I was the last generation that's quoted as Gen X. And beginning in, when I started high school even, which would have been, I graduated back in 2000. So the years I was in high school, we didn't have civics. And I think the idea of civics is one of those things where like it teaches about the idea of civic duty, and it wasn't always about just party line, right? I remember Richard Dreyfuss of all people is this huge proponent of civics. He's also he was made a Mason.
I never knew that.
Yeah. Brother Richard Dreyfuss. He was mentioning something about talking about basically how to vote, and he said, "I've always said that if you just vote party line, they're insane," and it seems like that's just kind of the way the American political system has been being pushed over all this time. So I'm looking forward to this book to see and to read about what you're going to do. Do you feel like this book is going to be a sort of fictionalized or nonfiction?
No, the new book will be the truth about what's going on, about how, I mean, if you look at look at where we live in Chicago, the Chicago machine. Yeah. That's not democracy. That's
Chicago's,
not the Chicago machine politics that they have. That's not democracy at all. I mean, stuffing ballot boxes. I mean, it's been going on for years. You've got people going to the polls like a bunch of mindless drones. They don't know the issue. If you look at some of the people that are, and I've worked in politics a lot too. That's why I know a lot about it. You have all of these people on the ballot. They don't know. People don't know who they are. They don't know these judges. They don't know the guy that's running for a commissioner of the college board, and they just vote party line then. And so people have to have structure in what they're voting at. We're voting, and people don't know why or what they're doing. And another thing that we've got too now, people are getting so delusioned, and I've talked to people on a good year. A good election will have 40% of the registered voters voting. Out of those 40%, if you look at the population at large, only 50% of the population is registered to vote. Only 50%. Okay, because you have children and this and that and whatever, and then some people just don't do it. So if only 50% of the people are registered to vote, out of that 50%, only 40% of them actually do it. So you have a small percentage of people that are making the decision for the rest of the population. And out of those people that are making that decision, how many of them are making an educated decision? Maybe half of that, 20%?
Sure.
So.
Well, I mean, I think when I first started voting back, I took that very seriously when I was, and always have, but perhaps not to the extent that I do now, which is, I think about my duty is to not pencil whip the ballot. My duty is I'm supposed to go in there and know who the people are.
Exactly.
And know what they're campaigning for so that I can vote for that. And you know what? Maybe it's an unpopular opinion because I know that today people tend to feel like it's what's at stake is a party rather than perhaps the issue. And because if the wrong party gets in, then the issue dies, or, the opposite happens to what they're looking for. But maybe an unpopular opinion would be if you don't know them, just don't fill in that bubble.
That's a very good idea. I like that. If you don't know them, don't vote for them.
I've often advocated for the removal of the party affiliation being shown on the ballot.
Yeah, I like that. That would be something that would be good to do.
The hard point, I guess, would force people to know who somebody is.
And I think we're going to get to that eventually, because I don't know if you remember this or not, but you could go into a voting booth and just vote party, and that would give you all the Democrats, all the Republicans.
Wow.
You just would vote Republican, and you get all the Republicans voting, all the Republicans on the ballot that day. You could just put Democrat and vote for all the Democrats going for an office that day. Now, the state legislature, the Illinois Supreme Court, did away with that over the last, I think about 10 years ago.
My gosh.
But before that, you could just walk in and just press Democrat. That's it. Everybody that was voted, no matter what they were running for, all the Democrats were voted on.
That's insanity.
They had that for years. since the inception of voting in Illinois, and they just did away with it. Not 10 years ago, probably. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so now I think you're making a lot of progress. They've got a lot of things that they are looking into. You had the federal government finally did away with the boss hogs, the Eddie Burks and the Mike Madigans and all of these big wig guys that are controlling the political destiny of everybody. Now I think you're going to start getting some more fairness, and you're going to start seeing some changes, I think, for the good.
I'm with you on that.
It won't happen overnight, but it's going to happen.
Well, that's the beauty. Hopefully we continue to use this idea of progressiveness in not a political sense, but a progressiveness in terms of getting a little bit better every single day. So, John, we've talked about the 3 books. We've talked a little bit about Masonry and their influence, in the way you're telling these stories and what you stand for. I guess something I wanted to ask you about is when we're talking about truth and justice and these kinds of things, from somebody who is both a Mason, who's worked in the public defender's office, the question would be, when do you keep a confidence and when do you speak up for justice? And how does being a Mason guide that choice?
It's a little difficult to answer that. Freemasonry gives you a moral backbone in order to guide you into those difficult decisions. It's a moral compass. And so when you look at the truth, you have to look at, is it in the best interest of everybody that's involved? And if telling the truth is, then that's what you have to do. And one of the things that I learned at the public defender's office, now I have to give testimony this week. I have to get on the stand, and they're going to fire questions at me, and water's going to roll down my back. But what they train us is just tell the truth. Just sit there and tell the truth, and you'll just be fine. And that's always a good training.
I remember there's a quote by Mark Twain, Brother Sam Clemens. He said, always tell the truth.
That's right.
Yeah, he said, always tell the truth, because then you don't have to remember anything.
and I've dealt with a lot of policemen with my line of work and everything. And that's when they interview you, or if they want to call it interrogate, when they do that, they ask you the same question differently several times. And if you come up with different answers, then they know you're lying. And that's part of it. But if you tell the truth, like you said with Mark Twain, you don't have to worry about it. So the truth is always something that's enlightening. It's always something that's going to be your best friend. I think that there are times you don't have to share the truth if it's dealing with your personal life. You don't have to share it. You don't tell a lie in order to cover something up. But that's the only line you should draw is, how much do you make, John? Well, I don't have to tell you that, So we'll leave it like that. But yeah, Freemasonry teaches you a moral code. It teaches you to go out into the world and to be that truthful person, and you'll feel better about it as you do it.
Perfect. Yeah, wonderfully said. When we separate the idea of faith versus what we're doing with that truth, is it an invasion of privacy, or is it getting to the bottom of a situation to solve something, or a legal issue or something? Everything you said.
It has to prevail at that point, right?
Yes. Absolutely. JohnCrivellone.com. I'll have a link to that in the show notes, and I'll probably also link your blog post. I wanted to ask if you've got anything that you wanted to plug that's coming up. When can we expect the new book? All these things.
Well, most of the information is going to be on my website, but the books are getting popular, and so the books are for sale on Amazon. They're for sale on Barnes & Noble, Google Books. I do book signings. It'll be on my website when I do the book signings. Just did some book signings down in Springfield with the Freemasons down at our Grand Lodge meeting, and I'll be doing some more with the Shriners. And so that's where we'll be. As far as my next book, probably sometime this spring, I'm hoping. March, April, or May, I'm hoping.
Wonderful. I'm really looking forward to picking that one up. I'm looking forward to our next meeting.
I'm looking forward to it too, sir. Yes. Thanks, RJ. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, brother.
All right, sir.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. One more time, our thanks goes out to Brother John Crivellone for giving us some time to talk about his projects and just have a great conversation about this concept of truth that extends beyond the fraternity and out into the real world, where we should be pursuing and trying to live up to that and standing for that. So one more time, our thanks goes out to him. A little preview of an upcoming episode. We'll have an interview with Brother Brian T. Maddox about something that he's intimately involved in. And I first met him out at Allied Masonic Degree, or AMD/Masonic Week, last year. Anyway, we'll have more on that in an upcoming episode, along with the interview with Brother Brian, which I know you all will enjoy. I want to thank our supporters of the show one more time, contributors, fellows, producers, and legacy partners of the show. If you're out there thinking, hey, how can I help assist in the production of quality Masonic and trusted Masonic education, head on over to our website, wcypodcast.com, click on support the show, check out your various options, and again, our thanks for any considerations. That's it for this week. I want to thank you all for joining me. Thank you for allowing me to bring this podcast to you week after week, month after month, year after year. Thank you for being a part of this journey across, maybe you want to think about it in terms of Lord of the Rings, or a band of brothers gathered together, traveling across Middle Earth, discovering all of the wild and amazing philosophies of Freemasonry together. If you're not a Lord of the Rings fan, then maybe we're like the Goonies. Anyway, we'll talk to you all next week, and until then, stay on the level. For Whence Came You, I'm Robert Johnson. Take care.
You've been listening to Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry with your host, Brother Robert Johnson. Be sure to join us for our next edition.
WCY Media.
Well, you guys beat me as no.